Hello, everybody, and welcome to another edition of Let's Talk ETC. I have with me today Dr. Matthew Greene. He's a professor at Johns Hopkins University in the Computer Science Department. He has an impressive resume, which I'm sure he'll elaborate on, but I wanted to have him for a long time because he's an expert in zero-knowledge proofs, and he knows about ZK-SNARKs. Those are two phrases, at least I see all the time on the internet, that I wish I knew more about, and they're very important. They pertain to their blockchain technologies involving those two phrases more and more. So that's why I thought it would be a great, important show to discuss this and related topics. So welcome, Dr. Greene.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Great. So I was looking at your Wikipedia page, and so I was impressed. It said what you already know. So you're a cryptographer specializing in anonymous cryptocurrencies. You've done work, or you specialize in elliptic curve cryptography, and then it also said satellite TV piracy. So what? I mean, it made it sound like I assume you're on the other side of the piracy, not trying to be a pirate. So
yeah, no, that Wikipedia article is weird. So I've worked on a lot of different things over my career. I've worked kind of in two different areas, right? I've done academic work where we build cryptographic protocols, and some of them are useful and a lot of them aren't. And then I've also worked in industry, and when I was in industry, I did a lot of stuff where I worked for a company, actually co-founded a company that tried to break a lot of actual crypto systems that are out in the world. And when you start to break things that are out in the world, one of the places where crypto gets used a lot is in digital rights management and things like like DVDs and streaming services and satellite TV. And it turns out that satellite TV has this incredibly cool history of people hacking it. Okay. And I've spent a bunch of time kind of looking at those hacks and trying to fight against them, but also kind of interested in them just because they're so clever. So I think it's a great kind of microcosm of how smart people can be when they're incentivized.
I see. And then it also said that you helped develop Zero Coin and Zero Cash, which is impressive. And it also said you exposed vulnerabilities, and it gave a list of in transport layer security, and then Easy Pass, Speed Pass, RSA, BSA, FE. So you want to talk a little bit about that? I'm curious how you even find vulnerabilities in technologies like that.
So I'll tell you one of the stories. So years ago, I was a grad student, and we were approached by RSA Computer, the RSA Security, and they said, we want to find some system out there that's using radio frequency ID systems, and we want to see if it's broken. And so we looked around, and we actually, I don't know if you know what Easy Pass is. Easy Pass is the toll booth, the toll things. It's only on the East Coast. A lot of people on the West Coast have something similar, but it's called something different. And so the basic idea is that these little radio devices, they're broadcasting your position everywhere you go. And the question is there any security in this? Are they can you just copy somebody's Easy Pass by scanning it, and then go around and use their account and drive around for free? And the answer is, yeah, you can totally do that because they're really, really badly designed. But to learn that, we had to take apart the whole system. We had to drive around, go through a bunch of tunnels, thought we were going to get arrested a bunch of times. And so we spent a bunch of time just looking at all these systems. And eventually we broke some of the systems that use crypto. We actually found exploits that allow you to do things. And one of the coolest ones was we found a system that prevents cars from being stolen. Okay. And we reverse engineered all the crypto without taking it apart, and we actually were able to start cars even if we didn't have the key, which I thought was great. And so that was kind of exciting. And there's been a lot of work on that, and that kind of work has already made it into criminal applications. Unfortunately, there are people mostly in Europe who steal cars all the time using that kind of tech. Okay. So it's great looking at crypto, and you ask how you find vulnerabilities in crypto. Well, the answer is you look at crypto. Okay. You go out and you look at a system, and you have to learn a bit of the basics. But to be honest, the kind of people who build real systems out in the actual world that use crypto, oftentimes they make terribly stupid mistakes. And there's a lot of fruitful room for discovering really cool exploitable vulnerabilities.
Okay, all right. So and then presumably you play the virtuous researcher that then reveals it in a responsible manner, or as much as you can, so that it's safely taken care of as quickly as possible?
Yeah, I mean, that's the basic idea. I think that's what kind of makes it, more interesting for me. I have the special protection of being an academic.
Uh-huh.
So I don't get as much crap as other security researchers do. So I
Okay.
know a lot of very smart security researchers who go out and they break systems and they present their results. They ethically disclose it. They do all that stuff. And then they still get sued or they still get harassed by companies. And so
Okay.
for me, what's great about being an academic is, not only do I get to do all that same stuff, but it's much harder for companies to say, "Oh, this person is actually a hacker." Like
Right.
they look stupid when they say that a Johns Hopkins professor is actually out, trying to break their stuff and make it insecure. So it gives us the opportunity to kind of make broken things fixed in a nice way.
Right. But having said that yes, you certainly have the reputation as somebody that has the people's best interests at heart. But doesn't the DMCA work against you, making it illegal to hack into things for whatever reason?
Yeah, no, it's true. So there are a bunch of laws like the DMCA, the Digital Millennium Copyright Act, that actually make it illegal to reverse engineer systems under like if they support some kind of copyright mechanism. And this has been something that's driven me nuts my whole career. And actually, I'm a named plaintiff on a lawsuit against the Copyright Office that the Electronic Frontier Foundation is actually funding, against trying to show that the DMCA is not constitutional as written, or at least the checks and balances aren't sufficient to protect people. And these kind of laws, I mean, I think they're terrible. They do nothing but hold us back as, in terms of science in this country, and they really prevent us from doing the kind of work that, people in other countries are able to do.
Right. No, I agree with you. And I wish we had a whole nother, period to talk about, legislative reform and copyright reform. That would be another great show topic. But since I promised our listeners the discussion of zero knowledge proofs, which you're an expert and I'm not, can you give us a little introduction to what that is?
Sure. Okay. So zero knowledge proofs go back. They were discovered in the 1980s by Goldwasser and Macaulay and also Rakoff. And so there's this incredible idea. So, I mean, the basic problem that people have been looking at in computer science for decades is how, I mean, this is theoretical computer science. How do you convince somebody else that that a statement, a mathematical statement is true? Right. And how hard is it to do that? So let me give you a really simple example. Let's say that I have a large number, which is the product of two prime numbers, right? So this is something you could probably, you have the math background to understand this by the time you're probably in like 7th grade. Mm-hmm. So this is a really simple thing. So how do I prove to you that I know the factorization of that big number? Well, the simplest way to do it is I could just give you the factors. I could just give you those factors that I know, right, and you could multiply them together, which is pretty efficient, and you can check to see if they're equal to that number. And that's great. The only problem is that once I've given you those numbers, you've learned them, and I can't make you forget them, right? And so this is all good if if this is just kind of like a schoolyard academic problem. But if we're talking about a crypto system, and if that big composite number is a public key for, let's say, the RSA crypto system, and the factors are my secret key for that same crypto system, and I want to prove to you that I know the secret key, I can't just give you the secret key, because once I've done that, the whole system is broken. It's toast. Right. So these kinds of problems, and I can give other problems. Like, let's say that you have a hashed password in a database, and I want to prove to you I know the password, and all kinds of other things. These kinds of problems, these are places where I want to convince you that I have this knowledge, or I have this information, or the statement's true, but I can't just give you the information. I have to somehow prove to you in such a way that you don't learn it. And this idea was really kind of made formal and actually developed by scientists at MIT. And the idea that the system that they came up with, the class of protocols, is something called a zero knowledge proof. And there's also something called a zero knowledge argument. Don't worry too much about the difference until we talk about SNARKs. But a zero knowledge proof is basically the idea that we have some mathematical statement, some mathematical problem, and I want to prove to you that it's true. And at the end of it, you have to come away with no knowledge other than the fact that you are convinced that this statement is true.
Right. Can I ask you a question about that, and you tell me if this is correct?
Yes.
So our listeners are familiar with Ethereum Classic and Ethereum, which is a smart contract blockchain system. And just like Bitcoin, if you want to make a transaction, you create what's called a digital signature. And as I don't need to explain to you, but we all, if we're involved in cryptocurrency, we have a private key, which is sometimes referred to as a wallet, part of a wallet. And so when we sign it, we are proving that we know the secret key, but we don't reveal it. So would that mean, is a digital signature an example of a zero knowledge proof?
So these are very similar technologies. And yes, in fact, ECDSA signatures, which are the signatures that are used in most cryptocurrencies, are based on another kind of another kind of signature scheme, which is itself a zero knowledge proof, which is Schnorr. So you've probably heard about Schnorr signatures if you've paid attention to Bitcoin and the future of these things. So yes, the sort of me being a little careful technical answer is not every digital signature is a zero knowledge proof.
Okay.
But some are, and in fact, the idea that I could prove to you that I know my secret signing key, and I can give you a signature without you learning my signing key is very much drawn from the same class of problems. So it really is very similar to that. So that's a good intuition of why you would want something like a zero knowledge proof.
Okay, great. So people that are wondering, an example of your idea of proving something without revealing anything else. So maybe a digital signature. Okay. And there's other examples, and people have thought of all kinds of clever ways to do what you're saying, right? To prove a statement without revealing any other information. Like one example I saw was if two millionaires wanted to see if they have the same wealth, the same balance, without revealing how much money they each make. Maybe they're vain or for whatever reason. And so there's a clever way they could confirm if they have the same balance without revealing their balance.
Yes. And so those protocols where you have a couple of people doing this and putting in their inputs, they're a little more complicated, but the idea is the same. You want to prove that at the end of the day, the only thing you learn is this one bit of information. Is it true, or is one person richer or not? You don't want to leak all this other information out. And you can see why that matters, right? So let's say that I'm on, the Ethereum blockchain and I have a bunch of money and I want to prove to you I have more money than you. Right. I don't want to go out there like showing you where all my money is. I mean, that's right. A good way to get robbed. So there are all kinds of applications where this ability to prove things but not give away all that extra information is super valuable.
Right. And so now I'm dying to hear this part of the show. But okay, ZK-SNARKs, that's what I believe Zcash uses and everybody sees mentioned. So can you enlighten us on what ZK-SNARKs is and why everybody's excited about it?
Sure. So, I mean, let me give you a little history. So the very first zero knowledge proofs were developed in the 1980s. And the great thing about this from a theoretical point of view is all the way back in like 1986, we had zero knowledge proofs that could prove just about any statement you wanted, right? If you had an entire computer program and you wanted to show you had an input to this, C language program that caused the program to output true, you could prove that in zero knowledge. I mean, the proofs are that powerful all the way back in the 80s. The problem was if I wanted to do something like that, the actual size of the proof that I would have to give you would be 100 megabytes or 100 gigabytes.
Wow.
And it would take me, 50 days to do it.
Okay.
So there's a big difference between being able to do something in theory and being able to do something in practice and making things efficient enough.
Right.
And so over the next couple decades, things got more and more efficient to the point where we could start to do some of these prove simple statements efficiently, but still not super efficient. And then, in the 2000s range, maybe a little later, some researchers came out with this new class of much more efficient, I'll call them zero knowledge proofs. Technically, they're zero knowledge arguments. Okay. And the difference there is a zero knowledge argument. I'm convincing you of something, but it's not 100%. I could still cheat and I could still give you the wrong answer, but with a microscopically, astronomically small probability. Okay. So these zero knowledge arguments, what made them very special is that now I could prove enormously complex statements like, and a C program is correct, but I could give you a proof that's about 300 bytes long.
Oh, I understand. Okay, now I get. Okay, so what I hear you saying, what a zero knowledge proof is, what we all think of when we think of a proof, where that assuming certain assumptions that are clearly stated, we know with certainty that something is true. But you're talking, so the arguments are where it's probabilistic. It's probably true. Okay.
So there's two different things. When you say ZK-SNARKs, which stands for zero knowledge, succinct, non-interactive arguments of knowledge. There's a lot of words there, and you have to kind of unpack it. The ZK you get because that means zero knowledge.
Okay.
The S, the succinct part, actually means that the proofs that we get are very short. We're not going to spend 100 gigabytes proving something to someone. We're going to spend 300 bytes. Right. And that's really the novelty. The fact that it's an argument, so you always have to, the universe is not our friend here. You always have to trade a little something in order to get more efficiency. So in exchange for getting this very, very efficient proof, what we're doing is we're going from an absolute guarantee to something that has this very small, negligible chance that I could lie to you.
Right.
But the important thing is that this chance, when I say that there's a small chance, I don't mean small like 1 in 10. I mean small like 1 in, trillion, some very, very large number. So effectively the same thing. And
right.
So,
okay. No, I was going to say, so if anybody's worried about that very small percentage, one way to kind of make it more intuitive would be there's more danger, right, of getting struck by lightning 100 times in 1 week, or some cosmic ray messing up a calculation on your laptop that, somehow at the worst possible time that messes up a financial transaction. There's a lot of other things to worry about that are more probable. Even though okay.
Yeah, right. I mean, you're definitely. And I actually, I feel a little bad for even bringing it up, because I do know that people kind of think about these things a lot and they get nervous, especially when there's money involved. Right. But the important thing to know is that, we are talking about 2 to, to the 1 over 2 to the 80 or 2 to the 128. We're talking about incredibly tiny 1 over the number of, stars in the universe kind of probabilities here. So this is very small. Right. Okay, so the great thing about these proof systems, these argument systems, is we can suddenly prove really complicated things quickly. And I'm kind of missing a step, which is that in 2011 or so, my students had ways to make systems like Bitcoin more private. And I don't know how much I have to explain, why Bitcoin isn't that private. I guess that's pretty common knowledge now. It wasn't back in 2011, but I'm happy to kind of give the overview if you think.
Sure. Yeah, definitely.
Okay. So we started looking at Bitcoin, and the obvious problem with Bitcoin, I think, most people who have looked at Bitcoin and Ethereum know that the problem there is that the entire blockchain is public, and every time you send a transaction to the blockchain, you're making a record that basically says this money coming from these inputs or these outputs of another transaction is being sent to these addresses. Right. And you can go on many of the different blockchain explorer sites, and you can actually follow money around. And this isn't great because, it's one thing if my bank knows who I'm spending money to, but it's much worse if all my neighbors know who I'm spending money to. And so this is actually a big privacy problem. There are some kind of solutions to it. You can use multiple addresses, but none of them is really perfect.
Right.
And so we started looking at this problem, and the obvious idea that came up when we were looking at this is, hey, instead of putting a Bitcoin transaction in plain text where everybody can read it, let's encrypt, or let's hide that Bitcoin transaction. We'll put it on the blockchain encrypted. But of course, Bitcoin doesn't work if you do that, right? If I put an encrypted Bitcoin transaction onto the blockchain, nobody can read it. Nobody can verify that it's correct, that it references real money. It's useless.
Right.
So the basic idea, we came up with a system called ZeroCoin, and the real intuition of this is what we did is we encrypted the transaction information, like where the money was coming from and who it was going to, and we then used a zero-knowledge proof to prove to everybody that the information that's encrypted inside of those ciphertexts is actually a valid, legitimate transaction, that we're not spending money twice, and that this is legit. And if you trust the zero-knowledge proof, which you should, then you know that even though you can't see the transaction data, you're not learning who's being paid, that nobody is double spending money, that all of the transaction data is legit. And that was the idea behind ZeroCoin. And we did this, we published this, I think, in 2013 or so, and there are actually some people who have implemented it out in various altcoins, so it exists.
Right.
But,
That is quite impressive because you're going up against two competing forces, right? The reason we all love cryptocurrencies on a blockchain is because everything is transparent, right? It solves the trust issue, right? Because we know what's going on. But so you were trying to maintain those virtues while having privacy, and those sometimes work against each other. So it seems like you're walking a very fine line to try to have it both ways.
And it really is, right? But that's the kind of the beauty of zero knowledge proofs is that they already, and with full credit to Goldwasser and Macaulay, the beauty of zero knowledge proofs is they already do this almost impossible seeming thing, which is they give you privacy without sacrificing that soundness that people can verify that things are correct. Okay. And so that's why it was such a good building block for that particular problem.
All right. So you make a cryptocurrency zero coin that uses these ZK-SNARK, I assume, was the method?
Oh, actually, no. So zero coin did not.
Okay.
It used an older form of zero knowledge proof, and the cost of that was that each transaction was about 20 to 30 kilobytes. And nobody wanted to use it. We went to the Bitcoin developers at the time, and they sort of laughed at us nicely. They were super nice. But they said, there's no way we're going to have Bitcoin transactions be 30 kilobytes. This is not efficient enough. There's no way it's going to work.
All right.
And so they said, why don't you go back and think about this and see if you can find a better way to do this. And that's what we did next.
Okay. So you want to continue that story?
Sure. Yeah. So in about 2000, we were presenting the paper for ZeroCoin, and we ran into a group of researchers from MIT who had been doing work on this new type of zero knowledge proof called the ZK-SNARK.
Okay.
And we sat down with them and we realized, this is the perfect tool to take the ZeroCoin protocol and make it much more efficient. And we basically, together, we implemented ZK-SNARKs on a very special function, very special circuit that allowed us to basically build something that was a private currency with a total proof size, a transaction size of like less than 1 kilobyte. And so these things, these 1 kilobyte, 30 kilobytes, they don't sound very interesting.
Right.
But when it comes to any kind of
Scaling.
cryptocurrency, this stuff, it's the difference between this works and it doesn't work.
Right.
And on top of that, we were able to do a whole bunch of stuff in the resulting currency. The protocol was called Zero Cash, where we could actually have all sorts of neat. You could spend all of your money. You never had to leave this private world. Mm-hmm. You could always have your transactions be encrypted. You could pay anybody, and it was much more powerful than ZeroCoin was. And so that was kind of the big result of that collaboration. And of course, it used ZK-SNARKs to do this.
Okay. Now, I just thought of something, going back to our point that we were discussing, where it's not mathematically proven in a pedantic sense, but that it's a high assurance. If anybody's bothered by that, there's already examples in other areas where cryptocurrencies are doing things probabilistically. For example, when you select a private key, your software picks a random number that then your private key, your address is calculated from that. And it sometimes people, they'll figure out that, hey, what if somebody in some other country just happens to pick the same private key as I do and have the same address, bam, they're going to have access to my funds. And that's something that exists today. You could say that that's a minor point of weakness, but it really isn't because it's so unlikely. Right?
No, that's exactly, I mean, this can happen to almost every currency. You're exactly right. I could end up picking the same private key as you, but the probability that I'll do that is 1 in 2 to the 256, which is just an unbelievable. I mean, when you get to numbers like 2 to the 256, the human brain stops functioning. We don't have any way of thinking about how big those numbers are.
Right.
And so the number of possible Bitcoin private keys is probably around the number of atoms or particles in the entire universe. And these are not numbers we can conceive of. We can think of the number 256 and it sounds small to us, but 2 to the 256, it's vast. And so when we say that something happens with probability 1 over 2 to the 256, we're effectively saying it never happens.
I think I may have to disagree with you. Let me tell you why. About your atoms in the universe. I was reading about the number of combinations in a Go game, Chinese game, And they actually, I think it's it's not the number of atoms in the universe. It's as if every atom was its own universe of atoms.
Yep.
Then it would go still has even more possibilities.
Yep. And this is the incredible thing is about combinatorics is that once you start thinking about combinations of values, the number of combinations explodes so much more rapidly than anything that exists in the physical world.
Right.
So, I mean, it's really, really possible to build things that are effectively never going to be found.
Now, I don't know the exact probability of ZK-SNARKs, but if it was the same or better than the probability of an address collision, I would think that would be a good marketing.
It's in the same zone. So the new version of Zcash, which is what the cryptocurrency that uses zero cash, I think it has 102 to 1 over 2 to the 160 chance of an attack. Okay. So very, very small. So really, really not likely. You're much more likely that if something's going to go wrong, it's going to go wrong due to somebody making a mistake in software than attacking that crypto.
Right.
So that's kind of the numbers that we're talking about. Very, very unlikely. However, with all crypto, there's risk, right? So ECDSA, which is the common signature scheme in Bitcoin, is known to be vulnerable to quantum computers. Right. So in 30 years, maybe less, somebody's going to build a computer that's able to basically recover, given a Bitcoin public key, is going to be able to go back and get the secret key. We know that's probably going to happen. And so that's the thing about crypto as in cryptography, is that there's always some risk of a major advance that will change everything. But this is the risk of being in cryptocurrency in the first place. Right.
And the joke, so I used to work for the National Security Agency, and I was talking with one of their members about, I'll tell you some non-classified stuff, but so you could have all the mathematical proofs in the world of how secure your system is, but like you were saying at the beginning of the show, people will inevitably set it up correctly, install something incorrectly, and so that's where the weakness is. That's a higher probability of happening. Furthermore, you could have all the mathematical proofs that the laptop in your home office is secure, and if the NSA cares about what you're doing, they'll just bash down your door at 3 a.m. and just take physical possession of your laptop. So, I mean, there's other things to worry about than just math, is what I'm saying.
Yeah, you're much more likely to get kidnapped by somebody who wants to steal your currency than you are to have someone exploit a theoretical crypto break against one of these underlying zero knowledge proofs or signatures or any of these things.
Right.
Nothing's impossible, but a lot of things are way more possible. Right. So yeah, I mean that's the great thing about crypto, though, is we can say, at least on paper, that things have very, very high security. And we can work with them. And so far, this has been borne out. People make mistakes in software, but generally speaking, the crypto is held up.
Right. Now, since you talked about zero cash, can you elaborate on the similarities and differences in relationship between zero cash and Zcash?
Yeah. So when we started, after we wrote zero cash, we kind of had this crazy idea that we might like to actually have somebody use it. Mm-hmm. We talked to the folks who were developing Bitcoin, and again, they were super nice, but they made it clear that Bitcoin was very conservative in its design, and they didn't want to include these kind of crazy privacy protocols. So after that, we talked about side chains. We tried to figure out some way of doing this. Ultimately, we found somebody who wanted to build an altcoin using zero cash. Mm-hmm. And this altcoin now is known as Zcash. And Zcash is out there and it exists, and you can buy it and use it. And it has this protocol built into it. And so it's amazing to me that, something that we developed, I think we published the paper in 2014. We launched the currency in 2016. And so that kind of like rapid deployment of really, really powerful advanced crypto to a form that you could use, you could even take the code and fork it if you didn't want to use Zcash, is really, really cool to me. Just the fact that, in my career, where typically doing something new in crypto takes 10 years to go anywhere, the fact that in cryptocurrency, we can actually develop these things so quickly and get people to use them is exciting to me.
So, Go ahead. And I was going to say, so wait, did I hear you correctly? So Zcash did it use source code from Zero Cash, or the ideas What was?
So it's based on the protocol, but the source code is new. So it's basically a fresh kind of implementation. So we had a research implementation of it, and that was open source, but it wasn't great. And so, so this was actually developed by professional engineers who are definitely much better at doing things than, me and my grad students are. So it's very solid. And actually, there's been a whole bunch of development since then. There's a new version of Zcash coming out called Sapling, which has a much more efficient version of the protocol that's, goes, from, it used to take about 25 or 30 seconds to spend a coin.
Okay.
And now I think it's going down to 2 to 3 seconds, depending on your hardware. So just that continuing improvements in this kind of technology are extremely neat.
Right. And are you doing any formal, explicit consulting with those teams with Zuko? I believe did Zcash?
Yeah, I'm an advisor to the Zcash company. So I have been involved in doing some of the science work for them, and that's kind of cool too.
Okay, so then maybe it'd be correct to say that you were a contributor to Zcash. Just on this as an aside, I think it would be cool if your Wikipedia page said I can update that for you if you want.
Yeah, go for it, definitely.
Okay.
I would feel really weird editing my own Wikipedia page. So I'm happy if you want to do that for me.
Yeah, somebody once told me that it's bad form to update or mess with your Wikipedia page. So yes, I will happily do that.
Okay.
All right. Now, so Zcash, so that anonymous altcoins are definitely an interesting application. What are some other powerful, interesting applications of zero knowledge proof technology?
So, you can do a lot of things with this. So aside from paying people, so before we get off of cryptocurrency, one of the things I've been working on is, how do you do other things like, for example, payment channels. Right now, payment channels are becoming a big deal, and people want to be able to pay folks very quickly using things like Lightning. Well, some of the work I've been working on is how do we make payment channels really, truly private so that the only thing that somebody learns is that they've been paid by someone who has a channel open with them. They don't learn who you are. So that's kind of a spin-off of these anonymous altcoins, but it's a similar idea. And of course, you can take that idea to smart contract. So think about Ethereum. Right now, if I run an Ethereum contract, I have to tell the whole world everything I did, all my inputs to that contract. And there's no reason to give that information away. So for example, if you have a smart contract that is you're playing, let's say you're making a prediction in a prediction market, sometimes you might want to keep your bets private, and that can be useful too. So there are things you can do there. But the thing that's really neat, zero knowledge proofs can also let you do all kinds of stuff. So, I mentioned software. So I mentioned that you could prove in zero knowledge that you ran a C program. Well, you could do that for anything. So I can prove to you that, if I give you the output of a program, let's say I want to send my information off to Amazon to compute on. One of the things you can do with zero knowledge proofs is you don't have to trust that Amazon is doing everything correctly. They can prove to you that everything was done correctly. So there's a lot of possibility in the kind of cloud computing world that these kinds of protocols will give you this additional assurance. So even if I send information off to someone I don't trust, and they do some computation for me, they can send me back the result, and I can be guaranteed that they did it right and they're not just lying to me about having done it. So those kind of things are really useful. The other area, which is not exactly zero knowledge, but is kind of neat, is that people are working on multi-party computation systems. And these are systems where a bunch of people can get together and they can compute on data together so that nobody learns anything but the output, anything but the results of that computation. And this is kind of a growing area for people like stock traders who have, a lot of information that they want to compute together, like figure out what a market looks like, but they don't want to put their proprietary information and send it to their competitors. So these kinds of technologies are starting to crop up and be exciting.
Right. So is it correct? My impression from what you just said is that zero knowledge proofs seems to be a way to provide privacy in almost every area in the digital world where you might not think that it would be possible.
Yes, like any function you can think of, there's probably some way to do it zero knowledge. Let me give you one last example. So Apple has this service where if you use iCloud to do backups, nowadays when you connect to iCloud, in the olden days, you would type in your password and it would go to iCloud. In the current design, that information doesn't actually get sent to iCloud. What happens is your iPhone does a zero knowledge proof that shows that you have the password. And that the idea of that is it basically prevents somebody from attacking, like, even if Apple is malicious and somebody hacks into their systems, that person won't learn your password. So I think it's a nice application of this same kind of idea, and it's a real application that most people use every day without even knowing it's there.
Right. So I would assume that we're just going to see more and more deeper integration. I don't see why we wouldn't see that of zero knowledge proof technology in everything.
Yeah, and I think that the neat thing about cryptocurrency is showing in this incredibly high value way, right, where there's like this built-in bug bounty. If cryptocurrency with zero knowledge proofs goes wrong, you lose a lot of money and somebody gains a lot of money. Right. So we're actually vetting this technology in a really high stakes way by putting it into cryptocurrencies. And that's great because it means that other people out in other industries will have more trust that it actually works.
Oh, that's right. People have a lot of motivation to hack, like Zcash. And so if it goes a couple of years without a major, embarrassing incident, that increases our confidence. Yes, good point.
Yeah,
that's true. So go ahead.
Go ahead.
No, I was going to say, so it sounds like the proofs are small enough to be practical because they're used in Zcash and other places. Are there still any practical issues with my dream of this being used everywhere? Any concerns?
So, I mean, it does take a little bit of time to prove the actual statement. So, like I said, in the original version of Zcash, which is called Sprout, it took about 30 seconds to make a transaction. Okay. And 30 seconds, it doesn't seem like a lot, but it's a lot. When you think about, how fast computers are, 30 seconds is a lot of computation. And so, the more complicated the thing you're trying to prove, the more time you're going to spend proving it. And that does tend to blow up. So if you're trying to do something really complicated, like a smart contract, it could take even longer. And so this is kind of the big limitation. We're working on that problem, but it's not free, right? Like your actual computing power is probably down below the level of a Commodore 64 if you want to do it in zero knowledge.
Okay. So basically, if there's anything, the state of the art, one of the problems people are working on is making everything faster and smaller footprint. We always want more. Okay, that makes sense. Good. So, and then I think we've pretty much covered the basics. What do you see in the future? Do you have any predictions for this technology and what we can all expect down the line, most likely?
So it's hard to say. I mean, I think that I think that in general we're going to see more financial institutions start to use these kinds of technology. So, by the way, the technology behind Zcash is already being used by JP Morgan as part of their Quorum blockchain. So they needed privacy. So they wanted to implement blockchains for trading assets. And the first thing they said is, we need privacy. We can't trade these things between banks without privacy. And so they actually adopted the Zcash, ZK-SNARK technology to do that. Okay. So you're already seeing it start to filter out there. I think we're going to start to see companies like Google start to do more kind of zero knowledge proofs and privacy preserving computation to collect data about users. And I think the real future is that right now we're shedding all of this data about ourselves. Every time we use a phone or we access our Apple Watch or whatever we're doing, we're pouring data out into the world. And I think that's not sustainable. At some point, we have to come up with a way to keep that data to ourselves. And zero knowledge proofs and all these computation systems, these are the tool that I think will eventually get us to a more private society.
Okay. Now we're not legislatures, so maybe this isn't fair to ask, but I'll ask it anyway. So, do you think governments, as researchers like you, are able to make privacy more a part of our digital lives? Do you think there'll be a pushback where they say, "Hey, whoa, wait a minute, we don't want you to have privacy," and they're going to somehow try to stop it?
It's definitely that. I mean, if it goes too far, I think you would see that. There's already kind of a pushback where a bunch of governments are very unhappy that encryption systems are being rolled out, phones are being encrypted, and text messages are being encrypted. They're not thrilled about that. But with that said, on the other hand, right there, the EU government, for example, is really interested in privacy, and they've been pushing legislation to try to make companies collect less data or be more, clear about what they're collecting. So I guess if these kind of zero knowledge technologies get efficient enough, I don't think it's impossible that someday down the line we'll see governments start to actually, mandate or maybe encourage the use of this kind of tech.
Okay, governments that want to promote privacy, you're saying?
Yeah,
Okay.
which is hopefully a bunch of governments. We'll see how things pan out.
Right. All right, good. I think you've covered everything I wanted to cover. Did I miss anything, or do you want to add anything else?
No, I think you've got it. I can't think of anything else.
Okay, wonderful. So thank you for joining me for this enlightening discussion. I'm glad we finally got together. And so best of luck with all of your cryptography research.
Thank you. Good luck.
All right, take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.